For the city of Longview, there's a good chance that you've noticed new sidewalks being installed. That's because people living in Longview wanted more sidewalks. And as KLTV7's Jamie Boyum reports, the city is working with developers who are required to install sidewalks in front of their properties.
There are some places in Longview that don't have sidewalks, like a stretch of Cotton Street near Loop 281. Longview Director of Development Services, Michael Shirley, is working from two studies that show residents want more sidewalks.
As a way to get more pedestrian infrastructure, that we should institute requirements on new commercial and residential projects that the developers need to participate with that and install sidewalks.
So, new buildings may require a sidewalk on their property, but Shirley says residents ask questions on social media.
Why do we have these segments of sidewalks all over town? We've got these sidewalks to nowhere, is kind of what they term them as.
So the city did some research to see how other cities were addressing that.
What we've come up with is a way to give them an option instead of having to build the sidewalk that doesn't connect to another segment. Is they can pay their fair share based on what the cost would be.
And the city would leverage the money or invest it until there are connecting properties and the whole sidewalk can be built. TxDOT is also doing sidewalk work in Longview along their roadways.
They're installing it next to the curb where there's going to be a shoulder, but our standards, there is a green space there between there to separate the pedestrian.
Shirley says sidewalks are going in where needed,
providing connectivity between our bus routes, our walking paths, and our major connectivity.
And the city believes it will cut down on foot traffic in roadways. Jamie Boyum, KLTV 7 News.
And Shirley also says when the city upgrades some roadways, they budget for sidewalks in areas conducive to foot traffic. He also adds developers do not get a discount for paying rather than building.